Hey everybody, Mr. Regan here. And today, if you're watching this video, we're going to be looking at how to go about fixing, creating, and revising our old model from Chapter 2 in order to create our Chapter 3 model. And we're going to be looking at understanding not only how the models can be graded, but how to make improvements to include what we learned in Chapter 3. So that's going to be our big goals. And to do that, we're going to be looking at a lot of different things, a lot of different resources, and we're going to be looking at some different examples, our rubric, and everything. So what's going to happen is we're obviously going to go through this review together. If at any point you feel confused or uncertain about things, come meet with me. We'll go over it. But essentially, we're going to introduce what we're doing here. We're going to talk about your resources here in Task 5, and then in Task 6, you're going to actually go in and create your Chapter 3 model, along with creating your Chapter 3 reflection. So let's go ahead and begin breaking down how we're going to do this. Up to now, you have done a few things. Number one, you have answered your Task 1 reflection question, which is where you explain why the newts are becoming more poisonous over time. You created a Chapter 1 model with all the information that you had at the time, and your goal was to explain how we went from this distant population to our present day population. And you were adding icons and images and arrows and things in here to kind of bridge the gap between how did we go from here to here? How did they go from this low poison to this high poison? We then had you create a Chapter 2 model, and you incorporated new information in here. You made fixes and changes as we learned more. And again, created a new model that some were very different, some were very similar, to help explain how we went from this low newt population, poison population, to this high poison population. So today, obviously, we're going to be doing the same thing here, but now we're looking at incorporating our Chapter 3 stuff. We'll not only be putting our model in here, but obviously completing our reflection in the very bottom. And to do that, the first thing I would like to start looking at is this right here. So if you remember, folks, this was the histogram we looked at in an earlier chapter, and this histogram here, everybody, is going to help us make sense of what's going on with our newts. So if we look at this histogram here, this histogram represents our newts in our distant past. So what does that mean? That means this column right here in our model is represented by this histogram here on the very far left. This is our distant past population. If we look at our model over here at our present day, the end of our before, during, and after model, you'll notice that that's our very last histogram here. So notice our distant past, we have our different poison levels with our population, and over here we have our present day population with our poison levels and our image here of that population. Now we know that time has passed, and during that time, the population shown here at generation 50, shown here at generation 40, includes information that helps us understand and will hopefully help us model how our newts are changing over time. So this is a good resource here to help us decide not only what our model should include, but what we need to show in our model, okay? So when you come into your Chapter 3 model, you might have to go to Chapter 2, say, what do I need from here? You might need to copy and paste that into Chapter 3, but then you'll need to go back and check, does my response match my model? Remember, our goal here is to write up our ideas, okay? Type up all of the reasons why our newts are becoming more poisonous over time and include our vocab. What you write here should be shown here. So what you explained here should be shown here. I should see it here, okay? And that's how we're creating our model. So how do we know if our model is a strong model? Well, that's where our rubric comes in, okay? So in our Task 5, we have a bunch of different resources. We have the rubric that we're going to look at. We have a video here on how to copy and paste your old models so that you aren't spending time obviously looking for those same old pictures or whatever it may be. So if you need help there, obviously pull that in. If you're somebody who needs resources on how to use shapes, text, and arrows, obviously watch that video. And then if you need help on adding new images or anything like that to your model, we'll watch that. But what we're going to do next is we're going to look at the rubric and an example of somebody's work to decide how we can make some improvements before you guys get to your Task 6, because Task 6 is where you create your Chapter 3 model and you complete the reflection afterwards. So let's take a look at our rubric. Our rubric here focuses on the following. Number one, we should be using many digital tools to model your full explanation of how the newts are changing. We also need to your model needs to accurately show a cause and effect relationship between the environment and the changing newt population. So, these are the two things I'm going to be looking for. And if you're asking yourself, well, what does that mean? Well, number one, if we're looking at what does it mean to use many digital tools? Do we use images, icons, shapes, colors, lines, arrows? Do we use many of these things, or do we just have a few images? Okay. If we only have a few images, then really what we have is we have very few digital tools used. To model their full explanation, do you show us how the newts change instead of tell us? Can we see all of your ideas and your response? Okay. Now notice when I say see, I mean images and icons. So if you use a lot of words, you're not showing us, you're telling us. So that means your model has more of an explanation rather than actual modeling what's happening with pictures and images. Okay. So let's look at an example of something that maybe doesn't have a lot of digital tools and maybe something that has more of an explanation than an actual model. So this is an example of a chapter 2 model that somebody made. And when we look at it, you'll notice a few things. Number one, we have some images here and we have some arrows. So they did a good job there, but that's all they have. Okay. Remember, we need to have icons, shapes, colors, lines, arrows, as many of these things as we can. Okay. They only have 3 pictures and 3 arrows to explain our newt population. I would probably say that's, well, pretty limited. Okay. Can somebody look at these 3 images and really understand how we went from here to here? And the answer is no. Okay. We really can't. We can't see what's happening. We see something with a newt, something with a snake, and something with poison. But we don't really see how it's changing. Well, Mr. Regan, look at all the words. They help explain things. You're right. They do. But remember, this is a model. A model doesn't use a ton of words to explain. A model uses images, arrows, icons to show and connect ideas. So when we look at that, does this person show us instead of tell us? Can we see their ideas from their response? Well, let's take a look. Well, I would first say no. We can't really see a lot of what's going on because, well, we only see 3 pictures and 3 arrows. They have a lot more words than pictures, icons, and arrows. So they're telling us more than, well, really showing us. The second thing is, I'm going to look to see, does your model match your response? Well, in here they talk about the environment, they talk about snakes, they cause them change over time. Sure, they become more poisonous. Low levels become the adaptive trait, and the new ones are the non-adaptive traits. And when I look at this, I'll be honest, I don't see a lot of these ideas. Okay. I don't see anything about adaptive and non-adaptive traits. I don't see anything about how the environment's changing. I see something with snakes and the poison level, so that matches, but not the other stuff. The other thing is, if I go in here and I read this, you notice it says the snake's offspring. Well, offspring means babies. There's babies being made. There's offsprings and new generations being created. Well, that idea wasn't here. So their idea of why the newts are changing doesn't match their model. So there's a lot going on here that really doesn't make sense. We have things in here that don't match their answer here, and then we have things in here that are very limited in terms of their actual model. So right now, if I were to grade this, I would actually give this grade. They use very few digital tools, and they only model parts of their explanation, not their whole explanation. So really, they're still they're still at the beginning phase of what's required of them. Okay. So at this point now is a good time to maybe pause the video and go look at yours. Do you use many digital tools? Do you use a lot of different modeling to show your explanation, or not a lot? Take a second, maybe pause the video, because next we're looking at the second requirement. All right. You ready to start the second requirement? If not, pause the video because that's where I'm going to be starting next. Model accurately explains and shows a cause and effect relationship between the environment and the changing newt population. So let's take a look at what that means. Model accurately shows a cause and effect relationship between the environment. Does it show how Does it explain and show how the environment changes over time? How does that change affect the newts? And the changing newt population. How does the newt population change over time, and why does this change occur? Well, let's take a look. So, we're looking at their chapter 2 model. First thing I notice is we have all low poison levels and a medium, and then we have to somehow get all the way to high poison level with a medium. So what I don't see here is how any high poison level, and all of a sudden we do have a lot of poison levels. So we need to explain that change. I need to explain the change in the environment and that cause and effect relationship. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but here's what I would say. When I read through this, this doesn't explain how we go from almost all low poison to all high poison. Okay, it does talk about something about them building resistance, but that really doesn't have anything to do with what we learned. Okay, the second thing is there needs to be an explanation as to how the cause and effect relationship, how there's a cause and effect relationship between our newts and their environment. In here, they talk about how snakes gain resistance to poison. Well, we're not talking about snakes. We're talking about newts. We need to explain the newts and their cause and effect relationship with the environment, not the snakes. The newts have a higher poison level so that the resistance won't protect the snakes from the poison as much as it would. Again, they're explaining a lot with the snakes. I don't understand why they continue to do this, but we need to explain how the newts are affected by their environment, not the snakes. The snakes' offspring start to build a resistance. Again, we're talking about snakes, not the newts. The low poison newts is not really affected against predators, so after generations, they would have to reproduce to make higher. Well, are they choosing to make higher poison levels? Do they wake up one day and say, hey, we need to be higher, and they just do it? How does that work? Notice they have a lot of information in the distance past. There's some information here in the present day. It's a lot of this stuff is scattered and all over the place. So it's really hard to read and understand. This is a really confusing model. So if I were to grade this, I would say the model inaccurately shows the impact on the environment that the environment has on the newts. Okay? Inaccurately shows the impact. And it inaccurately shows how the newt population changes over time. It doesn't explain how we went from all low to all high. It doesn't explain how we did this over a long period of time. The model doesn't show any of this. It just shows 3 pictures. So overall, the grade probably would be a beginning requirements. So folks, now is a good time to ask yourself, how does my model compare? Do I have questions about what I just saw? Do I maybe want my teacher to go over this with me? Okay. Because the next thing you guys are going to do is you're going to go back to the survey and ask, do I understand how my model is going to be graded? Do I understand how to make improvements? If you said no to any of those questions, come see me. Let's look at it together. If you do understand, great. Use your resources. There's the model if you need. There's the things with the rubric as well. But if you do understand what to do next, you're going to be looking at task 6. Create your model, complete the reflection. Okay? If you have questions, come see me. Otherwise, good luck.